Hello, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half an hour, we're going to see what is making headlines with the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman and the political correspondent at Politics Show, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, thanks very much for giving up your Saturday night. Let's see what's on some of those front pages. Last flight out of hell. The Sunday People pictures the devastation of Israeli attacks on Beirut and the struggle of some Brits to escape. Writing in the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister calls on all sides in the conflict to back away from the brink and says hatred of Jews and Muslims in Britain has risen since the October the 7th attacks a year ago. In the Sunday Telegraph, it leads with a warning of what it calls mortgage misery after Treasury analysis showed the Chancellor's plan to borrow more to fund spending could push mortgage rates up by 1.25%. The Observer leads with what it says are growing doubts over the plan to charge VAT on private school fees because of fears it could lead to administrative chaos, job losses and also impact the state sector. The Mirror has news of a new simple blood test which can detect the 12 most common types of cancer before symptoms show. The Sunday Express reports troops in the Falklands are on alert in case Argentina makes a fresh attempt to take them. It's after the UK gave up control of most of the Chagos Islands last week. And the Mail claims an exclusive with news that teenage boys face possible investigation by anti-terror police if they make sexist remarks in class using powers originally intended to combat Islamic extremism. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch along with us. All right, as I said, tonight we're joined by the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman and by political correspondent at Politics Show, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, thanks very much for being with us. Let's get straight into it. We're going to start with page 7 in the Express, Ava. And, I mean, we are waiting, I guess, to see what the Israeli reaction will be to that barrage of missiles from last week. But while that wait goes on, the bombing of Lebanon continues. Well,
yes, the Israeli Defence Forces are currently continuing their bombing campaign of Beirut this evening. So most of these airstrikes have been conducted sort of past midnight, and that's begun again. The IDF have said that 2 Hamas chiefs have been killed in those strikes, but there are also collateral damage of nearly, well, I think it's about 1,100 people now, civilians who have been killed during these strikes. You're now also looking at around 1.2 million people who've been displaced around the region. The IDF are hoping to move people north. They're hoping to move Hezbollah north, but actually a lot of people are moving further south, and you'll find all along the south now there are refugee camps and there are a lot of people who are hiding out in schools and hiding out in areas there. But yes, it continues as we speak right now, that the bombing continues. Yeah, and we've actually got the latest picture. This was just 45 minutes or so ago. More airstrikes, it would seem, on southern Beirut. And Bobby, look, humanitarian crisis is looming. I mean, it probably speaks to how dangerous it is for some people in Lebanon right now that people are going back to Syria.
Yes, it certainly is it's a terrible situation. Any situation in which civilians are being affected, it obviously is something that upsets anyone. I mean, we obviously have to look at the genesis of this. You know, we talk about displaced civilians. There have been 60,000, 70,000 Israeli civilians in the north of Israel who haven't been able to be in their homes for the last year. This conflict started prior to any Israeli retaliation for October 7th because Hezbollah started bombing Israeli civilians. So, and Hezbollah had been in breach of UN Resolution 1701 consistently, which required Hezbollah to be north of the Litani River. So this is a terrible situation, and the key thing is to try and minimise any loss of civilian life. But I do think we also need to have a broader perspective about what's going on here, which is that an Iranian proxy has been for the last year sending rockets towards civilian areas. And so I think when you look at what has caused this to happen, and we end up in this appalling situation, that is the genesis of that situation.
I mean, let's just move on to the front of the Telegraph, if we can now as well, to this story in the sidebar. We're just days away now from the anniversary of October the 7th. It's going to be marked on Monday. There was a pro-Palestinian protest in London today. And take us through this reporting that seems to suggest on the front of the Telegraph that there was a sign there saying, "I love Hezbollah." Yes,
and look, frankly, I don't think this comes as any surprise to anyone who's been looking at the process that we've seen in London over the past year. Now, of course, a huge number of people go on these protests with the right motives, and people obviously are entitled to express their views. But I think that for far too long, and this goes to Mark Rowley, the head of the Met Police, the Met Police has been allowing inappropriate, racist slogans, often in support of terrorist organisations, to be a part of these protests. And what you see, one of the banners that's highlighted here on the front of the Telegraph is an I Love Hezbollah banner, which is actually an offence contrary to the Terrorism Act. But, you know, crowds there chanting Yemen, Yemen, turn another ship around in support of the Houthis who are firing rockets at ships in international shipping channels. And fundamentally, I think there has been a failure of policing by the Met, allowing, right from just after October the 7th, allowing genocidal slogans like from the river to the sea, globalise the Intifada, to become normalised as part of these protests. And we have to allow people to protest when they have legitimate concerns, and as I say, a lot of people there do, but I think we have to accept that these have become hate marches for far too many people on them without the Met stepping in properly.
I think that might be a little bit unfair. I mean, there were 300,000 people who were on that march today, so I don't think we could define it as a hate march. I do think that this particular sign, I mean, it is inflammatory and it's outrageous, and there have been a number of arrests today. It's
15
actually
arrests, I think.
15 arrests. But it's very, I mean, so the Met are exercising their powers.
The Met is not exercising powers because people carrying this sign, for example, are not arrested at the time, and it's always done by reports to the Met afterwards on social media. Why are the police officers who are there not arresting people at the time? I find that pretty astonishing.
Do you know what? I would actually agree with you up to a point. I would say that I've covered a number of these marches, and they are very difficult, actually, to police, and they are very difficult to control when you're there. I mean, the sheer scale, 300,000 people there, it's almost like, you know, when you're at a football match and someone gets into a fight and you go, well, how on earth has that been allowed to happen? I don't think that that should be seen as a reflection of the broad intent of the people who are on that march today. But, you know, I would say the Met should exercise their powers.
Yeah, and look, I'm not suggesting that it does reflect the majority of the people who are there. But it's as much needed as it is for the people who are legitimately on that march, as for the people who are offended and affected by this, because it delegitimises the whole thing when consistently, and it happens every time, there is this kind of hate, obvious anti-Semitism taking place in all of these marches. And as I say, I think this is a failure because there are policy decisions by the Met. The slogan "From the river to the sea" is a genocidal slogan which the Met has legitimised. Globalise the Intifada, the same. And the Met is allowing this to happen every
So are you expecting for the police to be arresting people at every single point where they see this happening? Is that what you would want to happen, Bobby?
Yes, because, well, I mean, this. If you glorify Hezbollah, which is a prescribed terrorist organisation under the Terrorism Act, I mean, that's a criminal offence. So if the police are there, why not arrest them?
I mean, the argument is that they, as Ava was saying, the vast majority of people on these marches are peaceful, and therefore they're not making those arrests, which is. Well,
I'm sure they are, and but I'm saying if you're someone who goes on the march with the best of intentions, as I'm sure 100,000 people do, surely you don't want someone next to you standing with an "I Love Hezbollah" banner any more than you'd want someone with an "I Love Islamic State" banner next to you. It's bad for everybody.
And I would agree with you, but of course we are doing this on the backdrop of Beirut being bombed to smithereens. So I do think that, you know, perhaps we should give that a little bit more time than this silly person who's brought that sign. Well,
I mean, I take the point.
Yep.
But
final point.
But obviously you have to look. Part of the reason for the problems in Beirut, and as I said, I have many friends in Lebanon, and I'm extraordinarily concerned about the civilians there. But part of the problem is because of this very organisation, Hezbollah, which is launching rockets from southern Lebanon. That's part of the problem.
OK, let's move on to the next story, if we can. And this is on the front of the Sunday Telegraph as well. This is the main story about mortgage misery. Bobby, do you want to start us with this?
Yes, so this is the Chancellor's plans potentially to liberalise, loosen the borrowing rules. Essentially, it would allow investment in public finances to count as investment for the purposes of the borrowing rules. And there is official modelling which suggests that this might end up pushing up interest rates by as much as 1.25% for the average mortgage, costing about £200 a month. Now, I'm not an economist, I don't know whether that is accurate or not, but obviously I think this is something that will probably give Rachel Reeves some pause for thought when she's putting together her budget, on the basis that would be an unwanted side effect. Obviously, you can see why she's desperate to find a bit of headroom to be able to invest, get the economy moving, but this could end up backfiring.
I guess, fears of mini-budget in the big budget that she's putting forward on 30th of October.
Yes, so this is about redefining debt, redefining national debt. So, you know, essentially, if you redefine it, increasing debt towards sort of productive investment rather than counting it towards GDP, part of our national debt, then that would mean that there is more headroom to invest. The fiscal studies that suggest if you borrow an extra, well, I think it was around 50 billion. Gosh, 5 billion.
50 billion.
50 billion. You know, it didn't feel right coming out of my mouth. What is? Yeah, it didn't feel right. 50 billion. Anyway, not a number I'm that familiar with. But yes, if you borrow another 50 billion, then yes, it could send the mortgage market into haywire.
But this is the thing, isn't it? Because these fiscal rules are self-imposed, aren't they? And there is some kind of jiggery-pokery that can be done to try and give Rachel Reeves more room because she doesn't want to put up taxes.
Yes, they could, because she's promised that we're not going to see any tax rises on working people. But, I mean, this is all to be revealed in the budget.
I suppose the danger is as well whether or not, you know, the pitch has been laid properly, if they've prepared markets for any kind of change that are going to be coming.
Yeah, and I mean, this story suggests that some of it is baked in, and for the long-term rate says an expectation there will be a bit more borrowing. But as I say, I mean, the Chancellor is in a very difficult position because obviously she's going to have to raise taxes. So she's looking for any way possible to try and minimise that. And this is part of the problem you have when you've gone through an election campaign. She's made a series of pledges, and I'm sure she wishes that she hadn't had to do that politically.
Well, we've only got a minute left, but let's go on to one of those pledges. And this is on the front of the Observer, isn't it? This is about the VAT plan for private schools. Much touted, I thought it was fine, and then suddenly we're starting to see some problems.
Well, this is Labour haven't confirmed this will take place on the 1st of January, so perhaps they're going back to the drawing board. They had received quite a lot of criticism about it not being properly, we didn't have a proper report on it, we didn't see how the impact assessment of it, so perhaps this is them reconsidering bringing it in as quickly as they planned to originally.
Why was it being rushed through for January? I mean, surely the start of the school year would have been a better place to do it?
It's probably more logical. I guess Labour just wanted to get on with it, right? It
was a big promise, wasn't it?
Yeah, and in a way it's quite easy to say you're going to do it, but I think for schools, probably bring it in a bit slower. And there are these boring VAT issues, which is, you know, until they can register for VAT, they can't then charge it. And if you're charging people in advance for the terms, it's quite difficult. So I think it maybe would be easier for everyone if you just bring it in the summer, and it gives everyone a bit more time to kind of get used to it.
And also they're avoiding another winter fuel disaster because they didn't obviously commission the impact assessment on that, and so they're concerned about potential bad press of doing it all over again.
Poor Emily Thornberry got sacked for saying there might be some of these logistical issues with this policy, so I don't know what she's thinking about it.
Feeling some sympathy for Emily Thornberry. All right, Bobby, Ava, thanks both for that. All right, plenty more to come, including this in the Telegraph, the headline, weight loss injections, no excuse to put your feet up, says the Health Secretary Wes Streeting. We'll discuss that next.
Trust in politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. You know, it takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, like, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel like just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, what is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman, and the political correspondent at Politics Show, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, let's get on with this and look at the front of the Sunday Express. Bobby, I know you like this story. Why don't you take us through this? Come on.
So, yes, it's the suggestion of the Falklands that troops are on red alert. I mean, I think we can probably safely say that troops aren't really on red alert. This obviously follows from the decision in relation to the Chagos Islands. I mean, I think what is the more interesting aspect of the story is that obviously Keir Starmer was asked about Gibraltar and the Falklands and didn't give an unequivocal response, which I find quite surprising because the position in relation to the Chagos Islands is obviously much more difficult. There's been an ICJ ruling in relation to it. We've obviously ended up with a 99-year lease of Diego Garcia. So you can argue the rights and wrongs of that backwards and forwards. I do think it's interesting not to give that unequivocal statement that the Falklands and Gibraltar are going nowhere, because I think those are in very different positions, most notably because of the populations in both of those places obviously want to continue being British overseas territories.
I mean, do Argentina and Spain want both of them back?
Well, Milei, in Argentina, Javier Milei has sort of like flip-flopped on whether he cares or not about the Falklands. But it's something I think that perhaps a generation above my own, and I'm not looking at you, it's more in your consciousness. But you know, I
was not. Can I just point out, I was not alive during the Falklands War.
No, I didn't think you were. I just had to
think.
point out because I'd looked at you. But look, I do think the story does feel a little bit like a red herring. I mean, it doesn't quite, maybe a bit of a false flag, because you know, in light of what's happening on the Chagos Islands, this sort of feels like the natural Sunday Express. Front page following that. But, you know, if you look at what's gone on with the Chagos Islands and speaking to a few Chagosians, they're not particularly happy with being given back to Mauritius and being completely left out of any of the decision-making in terms of what happens going forward. So perhaps we should speak to some people who live on the Falklands.
I think they would say they want to be part of Britain. Is there anyone around this table who was alive when that was happening? I
don't believe it.
I can't remember anyway. All right, let's move on to the front of the Telegraph. And this one is all about those weight loss injections. I'm going to start with you again, Bob, because I know that you're into this story too, aren't you?
I'm not on weight loss injections before you
Never
suggest
suggested you were.
But so Wed Street.
He's getting battered, isn't he?
So the Health Secretary, Wed Street, is saying that weight loss injections are no excuse to put your feet up, and that is obviously right. Which is that if you take Ozempic or whichever your weight loss injection is,
others are available.
Then obviously it's probably not going to work in the long term if you don't do something to back that up. You want to start eating more healthily and you want to start exercising. But equally, I am a big fan of weight loss injections because I think people. Some people find it hard. You know, not everyone has amazing willpower or loves going for a run. and people need a bit of a helping hand. And obviously, obesity is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for individuals in terms of life expectancy. It's a massive problem for the NHS and what it costs society. So the fact that we do have these drugs which can help people to lose weight, I think is a wonderful thing. I don't think people should be ashamed of being on it. I think people should be fine about it. We wear glasses. Sometimes you need a bit of help. That's all fine.
Absolutely. I mean, the drug behind it, the semaglutide, is quite a wonder drug. There are other applications for it as well that they're still kind of looking at. What do you think? Do you think we should everyone who needs it should be on it?
Well, it's tricky because, the weight loss jab only helps you, lose the weight to begin with. It doesn't change your mindset. And actually, a lot of the time when people are clinically obese, that is connected to their mental health or their mental state. So if you're not bridging the gap between, coming off of Ozempic and then going into your normal eating habits, if you're not assisting someone with that transition, then your weight is just going to flip-flop. And I can imagine that would be terrible for your heart going forward. So, I'm not a massive fan of Ozempic. I think you should have to do it the old-fashioned way. I think it might be better for
There was
your
a time
mental
not long
health.
ago as well when people were struggling to get their diabetes medication because everyone was taking the Ozempic as well, which is another issue with this.
Yes. I don't think that was linked to Boris Johnson going to invade Holland. I think that was for the COVID jabs, but perhaps he was actually going to invade for Ozempic.
That's something entirely different.
Personal use, I don't know.
But we're happy for people to be taking it, yeah? That's what we're saying, Bobby. You think we should all be...
Yes, but I really think it's anything that, as I say, I entirely
Science
agree.
moves on.
But
right?
science moves on, and some people need that helping hand. I agree with Wes Streeting, which is saying you can't just sit back and say, I'll let this drug do it for me, and you do need to have some personal responsibility when you can. But look, going to the gym that first time, particularly if you are a bit overweight and you're not in the best of shape, it's difficult. If you can just sort of slim down a bit, feel better about yourself, feel less body conscious, though people shouldn't feel body conscious anyway, hasten to add. I think it's the kind of thing for some people in the right circumstance, it really is a help.
All right, Bobby, Ava, thanks both. More from you later on this evening. Thank you for now. Now, coming up on Sky News at 11, we'll have more on the conflict in the Middle East as Israel continues to strike the Lebanese capital, Beirut, with more airstrikes this hour. We'll have the very latest next.